Welcome to day 2 of DealMakers. For those that were with us yesterday, for those joining us today, welcome to the 4th edition of DealMakers. My name is Rasha Manna, for those that might not know me, and I run Endeavor Jordan. And for those that don't know Endeavor, we're a global nonprofit organization that are selecting and supporting the highest impact, highest growth, highest potential entrepreneurs. And for most of the year, we focus on working with our companies, working with our entrepreneurs and engaging our network, our board members and our mentors and our entrepreneurs. But this particular event, we open up to the ecosystem. We do it because partially, like the investors, we're constantly looking for new companies to invite into the network. And so this keeps us in touch with new startups. But also because it's part of our way to give back to the community and to allow entrepreneurs that are outside of the Endeavor network to benefit from our global network. And so we do this to try and spread the benefit of Endeavor across the ecosystem. I'm very excited today to have with us Careem for 2 reasons. Because first of all, I think it's one of the startups that's most talked about and fastest growing in the region. But also because one of the things we keep hearing about from entrepreneurs is the constant challenge of dealing with difficult regulatory environments and difficult markets. And I don't know if anyone's getting as much hassle as Careem. We're certainly having them jump through the hoops in Jordan. But I think there's going to be lots of lessons learned for the entrepreneurs from Mudassir. So I'd like to invite Mudassir to the stage, and also Surush from Beko Capital, who's going to be moderating the conversation. A warm hand, please.
Thank you very much, Rasha. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to this event. You know, it's always challenging to put off events like this. So, you know, the Endeavor team has done a fantastic job bringing this event together and bringing all of us on this platform. The journey of Careem has been one of intense focus, perseverance, and a lot of blessing. And I'm delighted to be here today to share this journey with you and some of the learnings from it so far. But before we get into the details, just a quick snapshot of where Careem is today, 4 years into the journey. We started the business on the 1st of Ramadan 2012, hence the name Careem. And today, alhamdulillah, we are in 11 countries, all the way from Morocco on the west to Pakistan in the east. In these 11 countries, we are in 43 cities. We have impacted the lives of about 100,000 captains, our term for drivers, and about 6 million customers. We've, alhamdulillah, managed to grow 25-30% month on month with the support of 800 colleagues at Careem and about $70 million in investment, mostly from regional investors. And we're quite blessed to have all of them on board with us. Now, the journey of Careem has been interesting, but I just want to share with you a little bit of how it started. And for the entrepreneurs in the room, hopefully it is similar to what you're going through. And for others, hopefully it brings some appreciation of the journey of an entrepreneur. So before we started Careem, we had what we called Project Bamboo. This was the project code name for our quest to find something to do with our lives. So both Magnus and myself, who were both at McKinsey as consultants, we decided in 2011 that we had spent enough time drawing PowerPoint slides, and we wanted to do something more meaningful with our lives. So we said, you know, should we go out and do something? And the 2 questions that confronted us were, should we really leave our cushy jobs? And second, if we leave them, what should we do instead? And, you know, these decisions are never easy for professionals because, you know, you have the safety net of an income, you have some prestige that comes with working at a big multinational. But after some thinking, the clarity prevailed, and we realized that to the first question, absolutely we should leave our jobs and do something entrepreneurial because the risk is actually very low. And what's the worst that can happen to us if the venture that we start doesn't succeed? And for people like us who had done the right education, that worked at companies before, the worst that can happen is a year later we'd be out there looking for a job again. But guess what? In the 1 year that we were out there, we would have learned so much that the experience would have made us more valuable to anyone that would hire us. So the risk is actually very low. It's 1 year of a lot of intense learning. And in the grand scheme of things, what's a year in a lifetime? So the risk was actually very low. We said, khalas, there's no need to think further. We should go out and do something. But now what do we do? It's not easy to figure out what to do. What are you passionate about? And the answer to that question was, what problems have we faced in our time in the region? Because we wanted to build something in the region. So the question started was, what problems have we faced? And if we can solve those problems, those are opportunities, those are businesses. So that's really how we started. And as consultants who were primarily based in Dubai that were traveling the region, ground transportation was a big issue. We were constantly taking cars from our houses to the airports, to the hotels to the client side. And we struggled getting a reliable service. So for us, this was right in our face. This was a problem that we had faced. So we said, khalas, let's work with ground transportation. And that's really how we started. Now, before Project Bamboo, we were living the life of luxury and comfort. We traveling nice cars and staying at nice hotels like this one. But after Project Bamboo, actually on the first day of Careem, which was the first of Ramadan, I remember boarding a bus in Dubai, going to Abu Dhabi. I paid 25 dirhams for that bus ride to go to Magnus's house in Abu Dhabi. And for the iftar on the first day of Ramadan, we had a 10 dirham biryani from a local shop. So life completely changed from a nice car to a bus, and from nice gourmet meals to a cheap biryani. And that's important for an entrepreneur, because the money that you put into the business, you need to make sure that it lasts as long as it can. So life really changed fundamentally in the way that we were living it. And this happened for a few months, because I was living in Abu Dhabi, I was living in Dubai, Magnus was in Abu Dhabi. One day I would go to Abu Dhabi in the bus, and the second day Magnus would come to Dubai. We could not afford an office, so we were working out of each other's houses. We were eating the cheapest things that we could to survive, because starting a business is expensive, and we didn't want to waste money on things like food and office space and others. So it was quite a shift, but it worked out quite well, and these are all good memories that we live with today. But the challenging part then was, what do we tell our friends and family? So I took the first leap, and I said, okay, I should tell my family that I have made this decision, and this is what I'm going to do. And my family was quite shocked. They're like, you're going to be running a taxi service after working at McKinsey and after going to these places that you went to. And this is how taxis look like in Pakistan, where I'm from. So they really imagined me sitting behind the wheel of a taxi like this and offering a service, right? And I did a few rides at the beginning as well, when we were not able to find enough drivers or captains to work with us. So they were actually completely astounded how I could even make a decision like this. And then we approached our colleagues, because we wanted to leave our jobs and start this thing, that we were thinking of doing this, and they thought we were completely crazy. In fact, months after we started Careem, we were still getting calls from our ex-colleagues asking us, are we done with our stupidity, and if we want to come back, the doors are still open. So that happened for a few months after we started Careem as well. So there was a lot of disbelief. What the hell are you guys doing? You're starting a taxi service. You were doing so much more. You could do so much more with your life. And I think that's typical for an entrepreneur, right? I think you're starting something new. If everyone thought this was a great opportunity, then everyone would be doing it, and there would not be an opportunity. So you have to go a little bit against the grain, and it is some validation that you're actually doing something right. But we could not be more excited, despite all of this disbelief and shock, because the opportunity that we had identified met the three things that we said we want to do with whatever we start. We said whatever we do, one should be really, really big. Second, it should be meaningful. It should not just be about making money or building a business. It should make a positive impact on the society. And the third, we said it should be challenging and fun. It should not be boring. It should not be something that we don't want to do. And if you look at the opportunity that we picked, ground transportation, and what we did, it is really big. It's actually bigger than we thought it is, to be honest. I think the first business plan that we submitted to our investors showed the opportunity at a $5 billion opportunity. Today, when we talk to investors, we say it's a $100 billion plus opportunity. So it's much, much bigger than a taxi dispatch service. It's actually mobility, which is the offering. And everyone needs to move from point A to point B, whether they move in their own cars or taxis or buses or trains, that's besides the point. But it is a basic need, like a food is a basic need, or a telecom is a basic need. So it's a very, very basic need. It's a big market. Is it meaningful? We struggled with the second bit initially. We're starting the service in Dubai, and Dubai has a certain lifestyle. If I'm moving consultants from point A to point B, what meaningful contribution am I making to the society? It wasn't clear to us at the beginning. But when we looked at the lives of our captains, of our drivers, that would benefit from that service, that's really what it made it meaningful for us. We could actually be significantly improving the way they make their living and help them make a better living. So in Dubai, where we started, most of the drivers are from Pakistan. They come away from their families. They're living in a small room where they have a bed for part of the day. 90% of the money they make goes back home to educate their kids and serve their families. So we were really inspired by having the opportunity to improve their lives and make things better for them. And that's what made it meaningful for us at the beginning. And after we started, we also realized that on the customer side, it's not just the consultants that we would be moving. We'd be moving a lot of ordinary people as well, trying to make their way in life. And the most inspiring thing has been what has happened in Saudi as a result of the service. And when you talk to some women in Saudi, you literally hear them talking about a pre-Careem Saudi and a post-Careem Saudi, which is really, really inspiring. Previously, they were not able to get around when they wanted to get around. They were dependent on their fathers, husbands, brothers, or their private drivers to be available. But now, at the click of a button, they can get a car and they can go from point A to point B when they want to go from point A to point B, not when the car is available or when someone is able to take them. So it's been really, really meaningful, and that's really what keeps us going. Any business aside, but the impact that Careem has allowed us to deliver on this region has been very inspirational. And lastly, is it challenging and fun? And yes, it is competitive, so that makes it a little bit challenging. But even beyond competitive, this business has a little bit of everything. You have to build technology, you have to be very strong in operations, you have to build a consumer brand, you have to manage the regulators, you have to do B2B. It's almost like a business school in a box, which makes it a lot of fun, but also makes it challenging. So we were very, very excited because the opportunity was big, it was meaningful, and it was challenging and fun. Now, that's been the beginning of Careem, right? It was a very humble start. We didn't realize this was going to be this big, but we stuck to the basics. Let's start this humbly and grow it as we go along. For the benefit of this audience, I thought I'd share 5 key lessons that we've learned from this journey. And the first one is solve local problems. I think this has been the hallmark of our journey so far. Because what we are doing today may look similar to what others have done in other parts of the world, but the reality is that we actually started on a very different place. When we started, we were actually a web-based interface that was used by companies to book transport for their staff, because that's the problem that we were solving, and that's what we thought was an opportunity, and that's how we started. And along the journey, we've always felt that our advantage and our strength is in understanding local problems and solving those local problems. Yes, you can be inspired by what's happening in the rest of the world and what others are doing, but there's a big risk that if you are obsessed with what others are doing, you're going to miss the boat and you're going to lose out. So one big learning for us in this journey so far, and something that we advise everyone that we meet, is make sure that you focus on the local problem and solve that local problem. Yes, be inspired by what others might be doing, but the focus has to be local problem solution. And if you do that, then you'll be successful. Second, iterate. You don't know what you don't know. And we don't know what we don't know as well. When we first started, we read this book called Lean Startup. I don't know how many of you have read that book. It's actually a great book. It's a principle by which a lot of people in the Silicon Valley say you should build companies. And it introduces a concept called minimal viable product, which is deliver something to the market as early as possible and start learning from the market. And we said we should also build an MVP, and we should go to the market in 6 weeks from the day of start. Now, some of you that have developed technology know that you can actually develop very little in 6 weeks, and technology projects are almost always late. So our 6 weeks were up, but the MVP, the features that we had in the MVP, we had not completed them. Many of the things were not done. So we were like, should we delay the MVP launch, or should we just launch it with whatever we have? And we decided, let's just launch it, and we see what the market tells us. So we launched it, and there were 2 or 3 things that we did not do at that time. It has been 4 years since then. We still haven't done those things. Because when we launched, the market was not asking for those things that we thought the market needed. the market was asking for something completely different. People are saying, do this, do this, do this, and we kept on doing what market was asking, as opposed to the things that we thought that the market needed. So the lesson was, you don't know everything, you don't know anything. Just build something that you think the market needs, go out and throw it in the market, and just let the customers and the captains tell you what they want and what they don't want. And just keep on iterating. Monitor closely, monitor the feedback closely, and make sure that you're constantly in the loop. So solve local problems, iterate, iterate, iterate. And I think this is perhaps, in my mind, the biggest lesson for us. Hire awesome people, whatever it takes. Now, it seems obvious, right? Hire awesome people. But I think the whatever it takes part is not something that all of us do. And in this region, it's a bit difficult to hire awesome people for a startup, because most smart people in the region, they actually want to work at multinationals and they want to work at branded organizations. And the unfortunate truth is, no place can a smart person have more impact than at a startup, because a startup has no institutional knowledge or process. It's all people-driven, it's all human-driven. So if you get a smart person, that person will have 10 times more impact than an average person, for example. But how do you get those people and get them to leave their cushy multinational jobs and work at a startup when you don't even have anything to pay them, or when you cannot pay them competitive wages? So we did 3 things that helped us. The first is, we actually didn't look for employees. We decided from the beginning that everyone at Careem is going to be a partner in Careem, and we'll give everyone stock options. So we were not looking for employees, we were looking for business partners. And that's really how we approached the whole recruiting game. So when you approach someone and say, dude, there is an opportunity for you to become a partner, we'd love for you to join this thing and be our partner in this endeavor, then it's a completely different discussion than saying, I want you to join as head of marketing or head of sales. So that's one thing that worked really well for us. The second thing that worked well is, when we were not able to recruit talent, we acquired talent. So we did some acquisitions along the way that brought in some very talented people into Careem. So we acquired a business in Saudi. This was back in 2013 or 2014, which actually got us Abdullah Elias, who's our co-founder and the head of Saudi. We acquired the team just to get him on board. Similarly, we acquired a team in Morocco, which was, again, a talent acquisition. And we have acquired like 2 or 3 other companies similar in the process, just to get the talent on board. Because the talent will pay for itself. So you should not be worried about paying for talent, because these people will come in and make everything worth it. And the last thing that we did is, we did not give up. It took us a year to convince Abdullah to join us. So if you find amazing people that you think are aligned with your mission, vision, values, and that can do amazing things, make sure you don't give up. Just stay at them. Because once you get them on board, all the effort that you put into it will be worth it. So talent is worth a lot more than you think, and use equity as much as possible to get that talent on board. So that really worked well for us. The fourth, find local allies. And you can find local allies as advisors, as investors. And I think most of us manage to do that in some shape or form. But we actually don't take enough advantage of these people. What ends up happening is we get them on board as investors, and then we share with them some monthly numbers or quarterly numbers. And that's the extent of that relationship for the most part. And once in a while, we'll ask them for help. And these are people that are some of the best minds in the region. They're some of the most well-connected people in the region. You would not be able to hire them if you wanted to. And you have them on board as an advisor or as an investor. Let's get the most out of them. Let's treat them like extensions of your team and give them homework to do, give them assignments. Make them your head of sales or head of marketing, whatever they might be good at, and make sure that you get the most out of them. And we did some of it, and we recognize that we need to do a lot more of it. But whenever we have done this, it has worked really, really well. Because these people actually deliver. And what you realize is, it's actually not a burden on them when you ask them to do these things. They're actually very, very happy to do it, because they want to contribute and make you successful as well, like anyone else. So get the right allies on board who can help you, and make sure that you get the most out of them. And lastly, have a purpose. It is a tough journey. There are many points along the way where you will want to give up. And if you're not clear why you're doing it, it's going to become very, very challenging. So make sure that you discover your purpose behind why you're doing this. And at Careem, it took us a year to define our purpose. And the purpose of Careem is to simplify the lives of people and build an awesome organization that inspires. And we will do this by being Careem. And Careem, as most of you know, means generous in Arabic. And we want to be Careem to our customers, we want to be Careem to our captains, and we want to be Careem to our colleagues. Careem to the customers is very straightforward, deliver outstanding customer service. Careem to our captains means looking after the captains, showing them respect, and making sure that we look after them holistically, not just in giving them work. And Careem to our colleagues means that we look after the professional development of our staff, our colleagues, we don't call them employees, and we make them partners in success. So by giving them stock options, they're all partners in success. As Careem has done well, everyone at Careem has done well. So we want to be Careem to our customers, our captains, our colleagues, and the mission is to simplify lives of people in the region and build an awesome organization that inspires. And I think it's important for all startups to try and identify that as quickly as possible so that it keeps you going and it helps you attract the right people, it helps you motivate people, and it also keeps you up at night to make sure that there is a bigger than money reason why you're doing it. Because the money part will fade away quickly. Once you reach a certain scale, this is not the thing that will motivate you. There has to be another reason why you have to be doing what you're doing. So find local problems and solve local problems. Iterate. Hire awesome people, whatever it takes. Get the right local allies on board and get the most out of them. And make sure that you have a purpose. Those are the 5 lessons that we believe have shaped our journey. And hopefully they're lessons for others in the audience. Now, what does the future look like? The opportunity, as I said, is much, much bigger than we thought it was. I remember when we submitted the business plan to STC Ventures, who came on board as the first round investor, we said this is a $5 billion market and we'll be doing maybe X million dollars in revenue by 2017. The market opportunity that as we believe today is 20 times that, and we're already doing 5 times the revenue that we thought we'd be doing in 2017. So, and this we didn't know, we just stumbled on it, to be honest, right? But alhamdulillah, we are here now, and we've been blessed with this opportunity, and we almost feel that we have a responsibility to the region to deliver. Because I'm probably not going to see this opportunity in my lifetime again, and what we are hoping to do from this opportunity is to build an institution in the region. Our region has struggled to build institutions. We don't have our General Electrics, our Googles, our McKinseys, our Goldman Sachs, and most of the smart people that come out of our region, we all want to work at those places. And then, the region's institutions get starved. They don't get the right people, and then they don't get built. So what we are hoping to do, we've had a great start so far. It's still early in the journey, but we're hoping that we can assemble a group of people that allow us to build that institution from the region that is going to impact the life of every person in the region, that is going to build amazing products and services. If you're building crappy products and services, you don't have the right to be called an institution. You have to be exceptional in what you do. And that's when you can be called an institution. You want to be socially responsible, meaning do good for the society. It cannot just be about money. You want to be the region's leadership factory. If you look at institutions around the world, they are the leadership factory. People go and work at those places, and then they come out and become leaders elsewhere. So we want to be a leadership factory of that sort as well. And we tell people at Careem, Careem's success is not you coming and doing amazing work at Careem, but if you go out, having worked at Careem and do amazing things, that is Careem's success as well, because that is part of the core mission of Careem. And finally, hopefully we build something that will outlast all of us and even people after us. There are at least 5,000 companies in the world that have been around for more than 200 years. 5,000 companies around for more than 200 years. And not a single one of them is from this region. It's a bit sad, right? So let's build these kind of institutions that can outlast all of us. Let's build it in the right way. Let's put the right foundations in place. And we believe we can do it. There are 700 million people that live in this region. We better do it. I talk to Magnus sometimes, he's from Sweden, and I tell him, man, you guys are 4 million people, and you have built an Ericsson, you have built an IKEA, you have built a Volvo, and we haven't built any of those. And it's not like we're not capable of building them. I think people are smart, people are hardworking, people are enterprising, but for some reason, we haven't built them. But I think we can build them, and inshallah, once we build the first few, we'll have many more coming after them, because you need to actually tell people that they can do it, and then the role model and the inspiration will produce many after it. So inshallah, our hope is, and our desire is, that the great start that we've had so far will result in us and many others in the region becoming institutions that will hopefully change the landscape of the region forever, inshallah. Thank you. Thank you. Ruth.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? So, Mudassir, thank you first of all for As expected, very inspirational introduction to Careem.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. I actually would love to pick up exactly where you left off, right? I think many that have heard about Careem but haven't heard from Mudassir about Careem may initially sort of think that it's a model very much inspired by an existing company. I hope that to everybody it's become clear that that's not the case at all, and that Careem is an extremely mission-driven organization. And I'd like to hear a little bit more from you on that topic. Can you give us a couple of examples where you really used your mission to make decisions, where you were at the crossroads, where you really felt like the mission was, what kept you true and honest on this path?
Yeah, it's a good question, I think. And I think the focus has to be on solving local problems, because if the mission is to simplify people's lives, let's understand what is the problem in their lives, and then let's try to solve these problems. So when we first started, we knew our lives better than anyone else. So we solved what was broken in our lives as consultants trying to navigate the region. So the focus was on building a web-based interface, giving access to assistants to make bookings for us, and making sure that their experience was super reliable and the customer service was very high, because that's what we were facing. Now, as we expanded the scope of the service and went after consumers, broader consumers, then we started solving their problems. And along the way, many things came up, some which are quite obvious and others which may be less obvious. The most obvious one is when we launched Saudi, we realized that many people were unable to use our service because they could not pay for the service. The service was only enabled for credit cards at the beginning. And as we know, the credit card penetration in Saudi is pretty low. And even people that have credit cards, they're not comfortable using them sometimes. So then we enabled the option to offer pay the service by cash, which might seem like a small thing in the app, but to enable that at the back end takes a lot of work and effort. So that's the more obvious one. And there have been some other things along the way that have made life difficult for us, but we have chosen the path because we wanted to offer people what they wanted. And one small example, which may not be super clear, is when we started, we were sharing the phone number of the customer with the captain so that if captain needed any help, they could call the customer. But we got feedback from customers, especially women in the region, that they don't want their numbers to be shared with captains. So then we stopped sharing the number of the customer with captains. Now what happens when the captain cannot get a hold of the customer? And if he needs help, he often gets lost because the maps in the region are not reliable. So then he would call our call center and we would have to guide him and deliver the service, which was super expensive and painful for us to do. But this was the right thing to do for the customers at that time. So I think the focus has always been, let's simplify people's lives. And how do we simplify people's lives? By understanding their problems and solving their problems.
I think there's obviously many entrepreneurs in the audience, and I would assume that one of the questions, and yesterday at some of the sessions we talked about this, so I'd love for you to elaborate on this one. How did you go about actually finding your mission, right? Like before even starting, right? I mean, it sounds so simple and sort of like, oh yeah, of course you solved your own problem, but like I'm sure at that time it was like, is this really a problem for me? Do I really care about it enough? Like, how did you really come about saying, you know what, this is my mission, I'm going to go after this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's very personal, right? So both Magnus and I had different reasons to do this. And some of you might know, in 2011, Magnus had a brain surgery. He almost died. The doctors before the surgery told him, there's a 15% chance that you're not going to make it. So say all your goodbyes. And he of course survived and calls himself Magnus 2.0 now. But he came out with a realization that he wants to build something big in his life that will be his legacy on the world. He didn't know what it was going to be, but it had to be big. And it had to be something that would outlast him. So that's where he was coming from. And in my case, in my last 6 months at McKinsey, McKinsey basically said, Pakistan, you're from Pakistan. Pakistan is the biggest country in the world, or McKinsey doesn't have an office. So we would love to open an office in Pakistan. And the way McKinsey works is people were not willing to make a bet on Pakistan. So they're like, dude, you're thinking of leaving anyways. Why don't you go and explore what can be done? So like, sure, I'll go. And part of the exercise was, making a list of companies that we could serve in Pakistan. And the criteria that was given to me was it has to be $1 billion business for it to be servable in a sustainable way. So I made a list of companies that were more than $1 billion in Pakistan. And take a guess, how many companies are worth more than $1 billion in a country of 200 million people? That's pretty close. There was only one at that time. And that was also just touching $1 billion, right? And I was actually embarrassed. Like, what the hell, right? I lived in San Francisco for many years, and every 100 meters, there are $1 billion businesses, and they're not just touching $1 billion, they're worth a lot more than $1 billion. And I was like, man, this is wrong. What have we done? Like, what went wrong in our evolution that we have not been able to build these things? And I look at Magnus again, and I'm like, dude, what the hell have you guys done right to be able to build these institutions? So I think there was a desire to build that institution a little bit as well. And we were quite agnostic to the problem. We weren't saying that mission is to solve transportation. Even today, the mission is not to solve transportation. The mission is to simplify people's lives and build an awesome organization that inspires. So the mission was to build an awesome organization that inspires more than solve a logistic transportation issue. So we came from different angles, but both of us emerged and converged on the need to build an institution in the region. And Magnus is from Sweden, but he's like, dude, sometimes I wonder what am I doing in this regional story? And then he has justified it to himself by saying, Sweden doesn't need him. Sweden has enough Magnuses, and he's married to a Palestinian, so he's very local in that way.
That's
he's
awesome.
like, this region needs me. I'm here to build this thing along with you guys.
So I guess let's get into that story a little bit more. So I'd love to talk about a couple of questions when it comes to just like operations, right? And I'd love for you to talk about some of the big challenges that you had just starting the business, and giving us some maybe of the examples that many people here may know about and experience but not talk about enough. Like, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had in the first 18 months of the company?
Yeah, first 18 months. Huh?
Pick and choose. Yeah,
Yeah,
must have been a lot.
I think it's a good one. I think funding and financing is a challenge.
Okay, we'll get to that.
We started with $100,000. We said 50,000. This should last us for a year. And by the time we had registered a company, we had paid the deposit on the office, and we had paid the deposit on accepting credit cards on our website, we were down $80,000. So you're like, okay, now there's only $20,000 left. How will we survive a year on that money? So it is expensive. At least it is expensive to start the business in Dubai. I don't know how it is in Jordan, but probably more affordable. And then it takes a while to raise money. A lot of people in the region need to see some traction, need to see some momentum before they will give you money. And there are a lot of people that will give you money without the momentum, but a lot of times these are not the people that you want to raise money from, right? We had those discussions as well, and the people were asking us for IRRs and yields, and we're like, I don't know. This is a binary outcome. Either you'll make a shitload of money or you lose all your money. So funding was a challenge at the beginning. And the second, as I mentioned, talent. Even though we came from branded institutions, it was very difficult to attract strong people at the beginning because very few people were open to taking the risk of working at a place with a no brand name, not making any money, and betting their future on us or on the business. And both of these things are so fundamental. They're the fuels that drive a business, right? If you don't have funding and if you don't have talent, how do you lift, right? How do you take off? So those were the two fundamental challenges. And everything else, I think, can be solved if you have these two things in place.
So I love that you touched on those 2 points because, obviously, it's quite apparent that you have overcome them to some extent now, let's put it that way. And, you have, 800 people at the company, great colleagues that are doing phenomenal work, and I would argue a pretty respectable slate of investors. Can you tell us a little bit more about, because you're one of the few entrepreneurs who actually has experience with scaling a technology business in this region. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you manage to keep the culture right? As you go from like 10 to 50 to 100, now to 800 people, and you're now you have acqui-hires, and you're bringing people in many different regions that have maybe different backgrounds. How do you make sure that that mission is still clear for everybody and the culture supports that?
Yeah. No, it's actually very tough. And this is one of those things that is not written about too much. But someone asked me before the panel, what's your biggest challenge? And my answer was scaling the organization. And I don't think we are doing it absolutely right yet. We are aware that this is something that needs to be done. But in the midst of so many other things, this ends up taking a backseat, unfortunately. But the theory says, and we're doing as much of it as we can, is one, you need to crystallize what the mission is and what the culture is and what the values are. And then you need to constantly communicate, recognize, and reward people living those values and reinforce them, right? So communication is very, very important, and it is a big part of how you make sure that everyone is living the same values and living the same culture. We do some of it, we should do more of it. But the other thing that we have done to some extent and to some success is by rotating people within the organization as well. So we try to encourage people to visit Dubai, spend some time in Dubai, for people in Egypt to go to Pakistan, for people in Pakistan to go to other places. And you start blending a culture that is not the culture that maybe you set out at the beginning, but this is a very original evolution of the culture. If you get the right people on board, and you have to be very, very clear on what the values are and what you test for in the interview process. And if you get the right people on board, then you have to be open to letting the culture evolve a bit and make sure that it doesn't transgress any boundaries.
Can you actually elaborate on that? Because I think there's many entrepreneurs that maybe haven't reached your scale just yet. But I would argue that culture is as important, if not more important, to get right at the very early stages, right? And you mentioned something interesting. You said that you almost test for it in the interview process. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that so maybe entrepreneurs can get a few tips from you on how to make sure you're getting the right people on board with the right culture? Is there certain questions? Is there a certain process? What is it?
So what is culture, right? Like we struggled with the definition of it as well. How do you create a culture? And what it came down to was you need to know what the values of the organization are. And then you need to make sure that you constantly communicate, reward, and recognize those values. Because culture is just a manifestation of values and people living those values. So at the beginning, we actually made a list of 6 values that we believe are integral to Careem. And those values are, customers and captains first, being bold, focus, being collaborative, being agile, and demonstrating ownership. So those are 6 values that we live and breathe by. And then we made a list of, very tactically made a list of how do we test for those values in the interview process. You can ask questions that will test for a person being bold, right? Okay, ask them what they've done in the past that is being bold and assess if that is bold enough or not. Ask for examples that someone has demonstrated collaborative teamwork and so forth. So you can test for those values, and when you ask people for examples and you probe, you start getting a sense of if people have those values or not. And if people meet those values, and if they're capable in what they are supposed to do, then you bring them on board. And then you let the culture evolve a bit, right? You're not going to get everyone that is super aligned and super similar. But as long as these fundamental things are aligned, then I think you should be open to letting people curate and evolve things.
So to shift gears a little bit, one of the 2 main challenges that you experienced within the first 18 months was fundraising. So one of my questions for you is, who actually was your first money and how did you convince them?
Yeah, the first money is always what they call the friends, family, and fools round, right? So we had some fools that came in as well. And they ranged all the way from our prior colleagues at McKinsey to my mother-in-law, who I refused to take money from because I knew it was a risky endeavor, but she insisted that she wants to put in the money.
That's a way to enforce commitment, for sure.
So the first money will come from people that you know. And these are the people that will trust you and know you. And interestingly, the first people that use the service are also people that you know. So I remember for the first 2-3 months, everyone that was using the service was someone that we knew or someone that was one hop away from us. And I think it was in the 3rd month that we saw a name that we did not recognize. We were like, who the hell is this person? Right? And that was a milestone, that the service is becoming a little bit broader than our immediate circle. So friends and family are very important, not just for fundraising, but also to use the service, give you feedback, and then spread the word about the service. And that's where the first money came from.
And obviously then you went on to raise from sort of more institutional investors. And you mentioned something really important that I think not enough entrepreneurs are actually stressing, which is, manage your investors. Think of them as an extension of your team. I'd love for you to give the audience a few examples of where you, really, where you've actually done that. And, what are some of the things that you asked them to do for you? Like, what should entrepreneurs ask their investors to do for them?
Yeah, it's a great question, I think. So it's good to get a slightly diverse set of investors, because then investors can bring different skills to the table as well. And some investors, like Danny at Beko, is extremely well connected. If you want to open doors, then you call Danny and he's going to know someone that knows someone that'll open that door for you. So there are people that are good in those things, and then you ask them to open doors and help you with business development. There are others that are good financiers. They've been in private equity before, that know how fundraising works, that know how the documents should be written, and then you ask them to help you with fundraising. So we've had some people like Mazen on the board, Alvaro to some extent, that come from that background, that we've asked to help us with fundraising. We have given them, you negotiate this document for us. And I don't know much about finance. I don't know what tag, drag, all of these things mean. Now I know a little bit, but these are people that know them intimately, so I actually delegate them to do these things for you. And then there are some investors that we have on board now that are experts in building internet businesses, experts in the ride-hailing space. So those we ask for help on the strategy side. So those are people that are connecting us with global internet businesses, global ride-hailing companies, and are helping us with strategy on how to scale and how to have a competitive advantage and compete successfully. So I think you have to understand the investor first and know the strength of the investor, and then leverage on that strength. And the things that come up are business development, fundraising, strategy. Those are the most obvious ones. It's difficult to get them operationally involved, but these are the things that they can help with quite successfully.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit now, and I'm going to ask you for a little bit of introspection.
Okay.
When it comes to fundraising, what were some of the biggest mistakes you made? What are like some of the things where you're like, damn, if I could do this all over again, I would have done that completely differently?
Yeah.
The entrepreneurs are going to appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I'm going to answer this, but maybe one comment before that.
Yeah.
You learn a lot more from failures than you learn from successes. So failure is not a bad thing. Because when you fail, you are forced to reflect, and you take those learnings to heart, right? They get entrenched in your inside of you, that, dude, this is what I did wrong and this is why I failed. So failures are extremely important from that perspective. Now, alhamdulillah, we have been somewhat successful. So a lot of that deep reflection has not happened. But if I were to just, share some things that are coming at the top of my head, it's important to get the right investors on board. I think sometimes entrepreneurs, and I've been culprit of this as well, you become very valuation sensitive, that you will go with the person that gives you the highest valuation. And sometimes the difference in the valuation is not too high, but you end up going with people that may not have been the best ones. Like, not that I'm saying that any investor in the past has not been the right one, but there are these trade-offs that you end up making, and I think you have to look at the investment a bit more holistically. It's not just money, it's also who is coming on board and what can they do for you, and do you have the right chemistry with them or not. So I think that's one thing that, I was probably a little bit more valuation sensitive, didn't want to give too much of the company away at the beginning. And there are some people that approached us at the beginning with a different valuation that maybe we could have gotten on board earlier rather than later. So that was one. I think being a little bit bolder would have been another one. There's some global investors that we spoke to at the beginning that we said, man, we're a regional business, this is the size of the market, this is what we're doing. And they're like, this is not big enough, this is not interesting enough. Now we understand that this is a lot bigger. Had we realized that early on and pitched it in that way, we could have been more successful with fundraising globally than we were. And now, of course, we are getting that traction that we were not getting earlier, because the business is just proving out to be much bigger than we thought. So I think that's probably another one. Try to understand the full potential of what you're doing, and then make sure that you pitch that full potential versus something that you might be doing now or might be doing for the next year or two. And sometimes it's not obvious, right? So you actually have to take a step back and put things in perspective and say, okay, what can this thing really become? Because currently we don't even pitch a transportation business to investors. Currently we are building a consumer internet brand that will be doing all sorts of things in the future, right? It's doing transportation, it will do financial services, it'll do payments, it'll do logistics. That's really the scope of potential. And have we realized that at the beginning? That would have changed some of the decisions some of the rejections that we got would have been.
So dare to be bold, like
Dare to
even
be
early
bold,
on,
yeah.
exactly, to get the right investors on board. So thank you for the introspection on the spot. To shift gears again a little bit, I'd love to talk about a topic that was mentioned earlier in the introduction, which is the regulatory environment. Now, I happen to know that obviously Careem is taking a very different approach than some of its competitors when it comes to the sort of action of how to work with governments. Can you walk us a little bit through your philosophy when it comes to how to sort of navigate regulatory environments and how that may even differ, region to region or country to country?
Yeah. So I'll make a statement, and I think it might come as a surprise, but I think it's true generally. In this region, regulatory is not a problem. And yes, you might see blips here and there, but it is nowhere close to a problem as it is in more developed markets like the US and Europe. Our service has not been shut down in maybe more than one city since we started, right? Like the business has been running. And we actually don't view the regulatory relationship as something that we need to manage and it's a policy thing. We view the governments as partners in this mission to improve the lives of people in this region. And if you look at the region, we have two big things that we can support with. One problem that we have in the region is one of unemployment. Depending on the country, we have 25 to 30% youth unemployment in the region. And it's leading to all sorts of social and other issues. So that's a huge problem that we face in the region. And the second issue that we have in the region is public transportation systems don't exist. And in Europe and the US, they build these train networks, the bus networks, all of these fancy things 100 years ago, and we still haven't built them. Even a rich country like Saudi hasn't built a metro system, doesn't have bus systems to speak of. Somehow it didn't happen, right? So we have massive unemployment, and we don't have public transport systems. And we believe that through what we are doing, we can actually solve both of these problems for the government and for the region. We can create a lot of jobs through this platform, and we are super grateful and fortunate that we are able to make this kind of an impact, and we can build a public transportation system as well. So when you approach the government and tell the government that, guess what, the Saudi government, I can be the largest employer of Saudis in the kingdom by 2018, and I can help you build this public transport infrastructure at a fraction of the cost that you would spend on something else, I think it's a completely different discussion, right? The governments become partners. So for the most part, we've been able to make that case, and we've been able to demonstrate that case as well, and align the governments on job creation and building public transport. Where some of the issues have come up are around vested interest. There are taxi associations and drivers in most of these markets that for some odd reason feel that we are a threat to them because they might be looking at CNN and BBC and seeing what's happening in the rest of the world. But as far as we can tell, we're actually not taking away business from them. 8 out of 10 customers that use us in Saudi were not using taxis before. These were not taxi customers that are using us. It's a different segment. These are people that were using their own cars before they started using us. The ratio in Egypt is 9 out of 10 that were using their own private cars and now are using us. I'm sure the Jordan ratio is probably something in that ballpark as well, because we're 40% more expensive than taxis, so we're actually not competing with them. It's a different segment that is using us instead of their own cars. And even if we were taking business away from them, we are not a transportation company, right? We are a dispatching platform. We're happy to work with taxis. We're happy to add them to our platform as well and give them business as well, as long as they meet our quality requirements. And we're happy to train them. We're happy to educate them, to help them meet their quality, to help them uplift their quality standards. So the regulatory landscape in the region is quite different than what you might see in Europe and the US. The governments are partners. And you see this as well, right? We've signed a strategic agreement with Dubai. We have a strategic agreement with Saudi. We've done something similar in Qatar. Inshallah, we'll do something similar in Jordan as well. And we'll create jobs, we'll build public transport, and we'll also help upgrade the taxi quality in these markets and dispatch to them as well.
Okay, perfect. 2 more questions before we get to Q&A, so rest assured there's hopefully plenty of time for questions from the audience. The first of the 2 is, many actually don't know that this is not your first entrepreneurial venture, and that you've been through this process once before. So my question for you is, if you could sort of transport Mudassir today back to Mudassir, let's call you 1.0 at that time, when you started your first venture, what were like some pieces of advice that you would give yourself at that time?
2 things. One is identify a big opportunity, and then make sure that you focus 200% on the big opportunity and make that the only mission in life. My first venture was a mobile application testing platform, which was very niche, and very soon we hit the ceiling. And we were like, dude, what do we do now, right? There's not that much room to keep on growing. So when we started Careem, it was at the back of our minds, at least the back of my mind, that we need to start something that is big, that has a lot of headroom. So that's what I wish I had known in the first venture as well. The first venture could have been different. And then you don't have to do what many entrepreneurs in the region do, right? They're parallel entrepreneurs. They do many things. And I feel that if you do many things, your focus gets fragmented, and then you're not able to build anything big, right? Just imagine if Bill Gates had done 5 things along with Microsoft, Microsoft would not be where it is today. If Steve Jobs had done 5 things when he was building Apple, it would not be where it is today. You need a lot of focus and effort and commitment to build something big. So the advice is, find something that has the headroom, that is a big market, and just focus 200% on that one thing, and just make it happen. So that's one thing, identify a big opportunity. And the second is people, right? It's all about people. You're not going to be able to do anything by yourself beyond maybe the first 6 months. So your focus should be on getting as amazing people as you can on board that are aligned with the mission and vision. And if you get the right people on board, this is autopilot, this happens.
So the last question is actually, obviously the theme or the name of the conference is DealMakers. There's a lot of investors here that I've also had the pleasure of meeting and speaking with. So this one is a bit selfish. What advice do you have for investors? Specifically, what were some of the common mistakes that you saw investors make when communicating with you, evaluating the opportunity to Careem? Even now on your board, feel free to start with us. I mean, I'm more than happy to sort of volunteer us and say, here's some of the things that I think we learned together, and here's some of the mistakes that maybe investors made. And in order to be better partners to entrepreneurs, here's some of the things that I would love for investors in the audience to take seriously.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think investors, just like entrepreneurs in the region, are evolving and learning. I think we are probably in VC 1.0 in the region, right? And the few things that you notice, which are different from more mature, VC markets, is one is, a lot of the terms that the investors here want are a bit more controlling. And I didn't even realize it when we signed our first agreements. It was subsequently when we did the Series B and Series C, and people were telling us, oh, how did you agree on that, right? Like, okay, this was what was given to us. I didn't know any better, so we just signed it, right? So many of the things that we were given as standard things in the VC world turned out not to be standard. They were standard maybe for this region, but that were not standard globally. And then there's a big, painful unwinding that happens in the subsequent rounds, right? Because future investors come in and they realize these are not, because future investors realize that founders are important, and you need the founders to have some operating flexibility and some meaningful upside for this thing to happen. And a lot of outside investors tend to be more founder-friendly than the local investors. So then they start the unwinding process, which is painful. The local investors don't want to give up the rights, and the foreign guys are saying, no, it doesn't make any sense. So I think there's probably some resetting of expectations that needs to happen. But, it's, like I said, entrepreneurs are also not at the same level in this region as an average as they might be in other parts of the world. So I think that both of them need to evolve with time. So that's one, and I think the second one is, don't be petty, right? We are in the VC. We are not. This is not private equity. This is not an IR play. This is you'll make 10x, 20x, 30x, 50x, or you'll make nothing. So a valuation of 3 million or 4 million in Series A, and it's nothing, right? Like, so why are you being also so petty on negotiating the last 100,000 valuation, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? Either it's going to be a big outcome or not. Thank you. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so do we have mics for the audience? Questions?
Hello. Have you guys thought of incorporating the existing taxi business into your business model? Thank you.
So the answer is, the question was, are we incorporating the taxi business in our business model? The answer is absolutely yes. We are working with taxis in Saudi already, working with taxis in Egypt, and very soon we'll start adding taxis to our platform in Dubai as well. So we are very eager and keen to work with taxis, as long as they meet our quality requirements. And we are also open to training taxi drivers and helping them meet the quality requirements over time. So we want to be a part of every trip that happens in the region, and many trips are still happening on taxis, will happen on taxis, so they are part and parcel of our vision.
By the way, would you guys mind just briefly introducing yourself? And whether you're an entrepreneur or investor? Or something else, it's fine. Just like,
my
so
name
we have
is
some background.
Tamer Salah from EBRD, not an entrepreneur, not an investor as well, with advisory support.
Cool.
My question is, during the initial stages of establishing the business, how did you get to convince drivers or captains and customers in parallel, given that each one is reliant on the other, so no one would be interested in joining the network since there are no clients, and vice versa? And how long did it take you actually to get to that point where people actually know about the service alone and they would be interested in using it without any other?
Yeah. I think it's a good question. This is a typical marketplace paradox, right? You need both customers and captains for this thing to work. And if there are no captains, customers don't want to join. And if there are no customers, captains don't want to join. So in our case, we started on the captain side. We actually went to captains and said, this is what we're doing. This is a device that we'll give you. And from time to time, you will get work. It'll be great if you can accept the work. And fortunately for us, we started the business in Ramadan, which was the summertime in Dubai. And that is a very slow time for captains. So they were very eager to get whatever business they can get. So they were open to working with our device, even if they get one booking a day, but they were open to that idea. And then we started marketing on the customer side and started creating some demand for them. And over time, the thing started scaling up. But that was how we did things organically when we had no money. But today, when we have some money in the bank, we're able to go and operate open markets a lot faster. So we just launched Istanbul last week. And the idea was, yes, you need some supply to make the service available. So you go to some suppliers and say, I'm going to commit to some business, and you will get X revenue per day, regardless of if you have business or not. So then those cars will always be available. If anyone makes a booking, that car will pick up the booking and go. So you have to invest some money on one side of the equation to get the supply up, and then you focus on the demand. And as the demand starts increasing, they already start making the kind of money that you've guaranteed them, so you're not subsidizing it. And then more people start coming onto the platform. So there is some investment required at the beginning, unless you get lucky like we did at the beginning, starting in Ramadan when things were slow.
Yeah.
Mike, so I guess that's me. Nadal Kanadilo, ASIS 500. So if you can share with us your experience on how you dealt with the regulatory issues. I know in Jordan you may be arrested when you leave here, so you have to be careful probably. But how did you deal with that? And what's your plan on dealing in a situation like in Jordan? I'm just kidding about the arresting force. So what do you do? Is it that you have a lobbying thing that you do, or is it that you apply different processes in different countries? In Turkey, for example, are you legal now, or you still have to go through the battle of getting certified and whatever the case might be?
Yeah, so like I said, our approach is typically one of partnership. that we will go to the government and try to partner with them in the different ways that meet their objectives as well. And happy to talk about Jordan since we're all here. And I think I love Jordanian people. They almost feel responsible that Careem is running into issues in Jordan, which you don't have to, but it's very nice to see that kind of passion and openness. But Jordan has been great for Careem. Amman, compared to some of our other cities, is relatively small. But the kind of adoption that we have seen in Amman is just very, very surprising and very positive. Amman does more trips per day than even Dubai on some days. So, for a small city like Amman to have that kind of business is very encouraging. So we have been welcomed on the customer side. We have been very welcomed on the captain side as well, who are taking up this as a way to earn a living. Yes, we're running into some challenges on the government side, but my impression is that the governments are aligned on the benefits of this platform to both create jobs and build public transport. There is some confusion on the taxi driver side that we are maybe taking away business from them. So I think there's some education process that needs to happen that we are actually serving a different segment. And guess what? Even if we were serving the same segment, we are simply a dispatching platform that will give you business as well if you join the platform. And some of this messaging takes time to just, you have to keep repeating the message, talk to as many people as you can to make sure that this message gets driven home. So my view on the situation in Jordan is, we just need to make sure that people understand what we do, how we do it, and what are the degrees of freedom. And there is no issue, right? Because it is a win-win-win for all parties concerned, including the taxi drivers that might be opposed to it at the moment.
So we have time for one more question. I think we had one.
Hello, my name is Lara Kudal from EY. I'm interested to learn more about the culture, the change of culture that Careem is hoping to do. You spoke about training when you answered one of my colleagues here. So do you offer training for your captains? And are you going to be part of the change that will change the driving culture for captains or taxi drivers? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think yes, we have training. The short answer is yes, we have training in all our markets. The training differs in different markets. So before anyone gets on the road, they go through a training process, which is very light in Dubai, where the regulator is quite strong, and they already do certifications and trainings, and it's much stronger in other markets where the regulator is not doing that work for us. So yes, there is training, and a lot more can be done on that front. We've even discussed ideas where we create driver academies or captain academies, where people can go in and get trained as captains, like more of a vocational training system. At least in Pakistan, we've actually partnered with the government-run Vocational Training Institute to create a driving course. So they're actually recruiting people from the villages, putting them through that vocational training course to become drivers for Careem and then join our fleet and work as captains. So and there are initiatives underway that you will see more and more training happening from our side, in addition to what is happening already.
Okay, thank you, and please join me in giving a big round of applause for Mudassir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.